The future of the West Bank is one of the most controversial issues in international relations, and it traditionally has been high on the U.S. foreign policy agenda. But even as policymakers pursue the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, many in Washington and the Middle East are asking, is it too late for the two-state solution? Our new website provides unprecedented details on West Bank settlements to help answer this critical question. But to understand the West Bank today, it's important to understand its history. In the summer of 1949, Israel signed an armistice agreement with Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria that halted hostilities. The armistice line, drawn in green ink, has become known as the Green Line, a temporary boundary. It marked the de facto borders of the State of Israel until 1967. During the Six-Day War of 1967, Israel took control of large stretches of land from its neighboring countries, including Gaza, which had been under Egyptian control, and the West Bank and East Jerusalem, which had been annexed by Jordan. After the war, Israel annexed East Jerusalem as part of the state while maintaining military control in the West Bank and Gaza. In the years after the 1967 war, Israeli citizens began settling the West Bank and Gaza. Some of the earliest settlers simply resettled the land their families held before 1948. Meanwhile, early Israeli governments created settlements as a security measure along the eastern perimeter of the West Bank, preventing further attacks from the traditional point of entry. Otherwise, settlements grew and became, in many ways, a civilian movement, acting independently and even at times against government policy. Informed by an interpretation of religious Zionist ideology, this movement viewed these territories as part of the complete land of Israel, a biblical inheritance. Though much of this activity is civilian-led, beginning in the 1970s, Israeli governments authorized the construction of Jewish West Bank settlements. Many Israelis moved into the territories for ideological reasons, while others were attracted by a relatively low cost of living. In 1993, Israel signed an interim agreement with the Palestine Liberation Organization, the Oslo Accords, that established a Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Gaza and envisioned a final peace agreement between the two parties. Though the accords don't specify an outcome, over time, the government of Israel endorsed what became known as the two-state solution. It envisioned a Jewish-Israeli state side by side with a sovereign demilitarized Palestinian state. The Oslo Accords identified the next steps between Israelis and Palestinians and also defined the core points of contention between Israelis and Palestinians that needed to be addressed in the future. These issues were control over Jerusalem and the holy sites, security arrangements, Palestinian refugees, and finally the borders of the two future entities. But by the year 2000, over 190,000 settlers were living in the West Bank. The prospect of relocating them became increasingly difficult and the two-state solution more distant. U.S. officials launched a major effort to find a comprehensive peace agreement. Meeting at Camp David, American, Israeli, and Palestinian officials discussed a breakthrough idea: land swaps. Israel would annex a small percentage of the territories and allow the future Palestinian state to take a similar amount of land in exchange. This creative innovation would prevent Israelis and Palestinians from struggling over the same land. In the wake of these failed negotiations, Palestinians launched a wave of violence and terror against Israeli citizens. In response, Israel built a security barrier largely adjacent to the Green Line. The barrier often diverges from the original 1967 line to accommodate heavily populated Jewish settlements near the boundary. Meanwhile, in 2005, Israel took the bold step of withdrawing all 8,000 Israeli settlers from Gaza and turning the territory over to the Palestinians. While this was extremely difficult, it showed that such an evacuation could take place. By identifying where the settlers live in the West Bank, a clear pattern emerges. The key point to understand is that they're not spread out evenly throughout the West Bank. Rather, an estimated 76 to 85% of the Israelis living beyond the Green Line inhabit 8% of the area, in settlement blocks or clusters close to the 1967 line. Both Israeli and Palestinian peace plans assume that some settlers will be incorporated into Israel, but they differ on the final figure, anywhere from 50 to 90%. This means a minority live in the remaining 92% of the West Bank. Once you realize this, the idea of land swaps becomes increasingly a feasible solution. What would be the fate of the estimated 90,000 settlers east of the barrier? Would they too be compensated for their homes? Could they even stay in the newly formed Palestinian state? These critical details remain to be determined. In the absence of peace talks between Israelis and Palestinians, doubts have arisen over the viability of the two-state solution. These doubts are fed by the belief that growing settlements would undermine that plan. But by closely examining the pattern of settlements through this website, it becomes clear that at least for now, a pathway still exists to achieving a solution that is acceptable to both sides. Of course, context matters. Settlements are an important issue, but certainly not the only one that needs to be resolved to reach peace. Other items on that original Oslo agenda, from security to refugees, are critical. And apart from the specifics, fundamental doubts about Palestinian acceptance of Israel as a rightful, legitimate state remain unresolved. If Palestinians question Israel's willingness to yield West Bank land in the pursuit of peace, Israelis question the reluctance of Palestinian leaders to educate their people for coexistence, to deny support to terrorists, and embrace the idea of people-to-people partnerships. In the pursuit of a lasting peace, all these issues matter, and the Washington Institute focuses on all of them. This website, however, focuses on one critical issue: settlements in the West Bank. We hope that as you use this website, you will explore this issue in greater depth and decide for yourself whether it is too late for a two-state solution.